Good morning, everybody. We'll call the meeting to order. I'd like to welcome two youth councillors to our meeting this morning. We have Ruben Panting and Robbie Anderson, so welcome to you fellows. You're welcome to participate if you feel an appropriate moment, as I just indicate, and we will give you that opportunity. The confirmation of the order of business will be as per the agenda, and reminding that we are live video streaming. Councillors' interests, if anyone has got any interests they wish to declare, can do so either now or at an item that may arise. And we now will start with a public forum. Ben Bushell from Community Compost Nelson, I invite you to the table, Ben.
Good morning.
Just when you're ready.
Oh, it stays on.
Yep.
Okay. I just forgot my notes. Okay. Right. I'm just watching the play sign. I have to pause it sometimes. Okay, thank you. Oh no, that's me stopping that.
Just to advise you that we've got two different technologies being integrated here. So we're on Apple into something else, and we've been through it. We understand it's okay, but just be understanding if we have a hiccup.
Okay, we're good to go. All right. Thank you for your patience with that. Good morning. My name is Ben Bushell. I'm the co-owner and co-creator of Community Compost. I'd like to thank you all for this time and opportunity to speak to you. The first half of my presentation is a quick montage of the last year, where we've come from and where we're up to. And the second half, and the reason why we're here, is a look at our immediate future. Community Compost is a social enterprise. We use a circular economy business model to sustain our purpose. We started with big dreams, but needed to see if the general public were ready. So we started off with a single market bin. We started showing up at the Nelson Saturday Market and also Isle Park Twilight Market. We were received extremely well, and people were excited to be involved. From the start, we were collecting 10 to 15 kilograms per week, just from the markets alone. As we started inquiring in local businesses, we were met with mixed responses. Some very positive and some less prepared to pay. Some businesses jumped at the opportunity. Keeping our eyes on our long-term vision, we pushed our website and especially social media. Encouragement and support came flooding in, messages, emails and phone calls. I was happy to be interviewed for the paper because it meant word was spreading. We collaborated with Waste No More, who manage waste at most NCC events. And from the Mask Parade, Race Unity and Evolve Festival and Mapua Fair, we received over a ton of compostable packaging in just our first summer alone. We are already receiving bookings for this summer's events and building relationships with multiple companies, including Nelson Events. I realised for the time being we needed a more efficient way to handle the volume of waste we were collecting. I began designing and even had a prototype made, and spent hours reading and researching how other places in the world handle their compostable waste and how others don't. I saw the challenges and obstacles, but was determined to find a model that could sustainably manage itself and also be upscalable and transferable from town to town. Interest kept coming in, and we decided to start collecting from homes to meet demand. We quickly expanded to 20 homes before becoming overwhelmed with waste. At this point, we realised something had to change, and we reached out for collaboration. It was a huge relief to be welcomed by Waimarama Community Gardens. This is a brief clip showing the weekly process, which, as you can see, is very labour intensive. Sorting and checking the waste for contamination takes time. Getting the mix right and turning the heaps takes time. We currently collect 400 kilograms of food per week from 5 businesses and 24 homes. Cleaning the buckets takes time too. And still up to this point, all labour has been voluntary. Now we have streamlined the operation well and have even shared the process with other volunteers and welcome as many volunteers as are available. We even have a regular driver for our collections as a volunteer currently, but we'd need to pay our drivers in the future if it expands much more. It's a lot to ask of a volunteer. These last 12 months of experience collecting and composting has galvanised our dreams and aspirations. I've composted my whole life in the UK, Africa, Asia, Australia and New Zealand. I've researched soil biology and many other composting methods, both backyard and commercial. Researching other commercial composting companies and the methods they use and the products they sell, I feel not only equipped but confident that I could create a sustainable model that met current and future challenges and demands. I'd like to share with you our vision, which we've held from the start and are very determined to actualise. The last 10 months for us has really been more of a pilot scheme than the project itself. Our vision is to compost for the whole of Nelson and then reaching out into Tasman and New Zealand. Conventional waste management business models can't make composting work. The cost of processing after collections absorbs the profit margin, and it's cheaper to just throw it in the landfill. Our business model is based on circular economy, where waste isn't treated as waste, but as a valued resource. The key to successful circular economy-based business models is to maximize the value of all outputs. We understand the many challenges presented by commercial composting, environmental, social, financial, etc., and our facility will empower us to overcome them. After many months of design and consultation, we're proud to share the twin reactors and our small modular system. Composting in vessel eliminates many challenges, such as smell, attracting vermin, leachate to the ground. The onboard computer system governs the climate inside each reactor. This ensures the composting process meets NZ, US and European standards and is future-proofed as regulations tighten. Automating the composting process eliminates hundreds of man-hours, yet this small facility still creates up to 5 full-time jobs, serving up to 1,000 homes, composting up to 500 tonnes of compost per year.
Can I just interrupt, Ben?
Sure.
Are you fair way through, are you? It's just that we've got a number of people with questions for you.
I have a minute left.
Right.
Thank you. The twin reactors integrate perfectly with the circular economy business model and can be replicated at other locations to suit any size demand. But it doesn't stop there. To achieve circular economy, this business model utilises the compost it produces at its highest value and becoming a direct sales outlet for the compost and other garden consumables allows us to maximise profits as well as reach as many people as possible. Growing high-value herbs and vegetables add even more value to the business and helps pay for overheads, providing restaurants and community with ethical organic produce and offering workshops and classes to everyone. This is a food waste management business Nelson will be proud of. I'd like to thank you for your time.
Yep, thank you very much. We have a number of questions. Councillor Noonan.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you. That's I love compost, so I'm interested in all things compost. I was growing up with these home things. Look, my question is, do you charge the people that have that you collect from? So if I wanted to put out, for example, or any of us wanted to put out a bucket full of compost, do you charge for that collection?
Yes, we do. We have 3 different size buckets. They all come with an airtight lid, and we collect once a week. The smallest bucket is $5.50, the medium is $7, and the largest bucket is 20 litres, and that's $8.50.
Thank you. And one more question, if you don't mind. When you've finished and you've got your compost, have you got a ready market for that?
There's always a market for good compost.
And are there places around the city that you sell them, or do you take it back to the market and sell it?
Both.
Okay.
We definitely intend to sell at the markets too, as a gourmet compost.
Right, thanks.
Yeah.
Councillor Rutledge.
It's good stuff.
Thank you. Looks really interesting. There was no request as part of your proposal, and I see you're pitching this as a social enterprise model. So I guess it's capital that you're trying to attract. So is that what you're requesting from council, and also have you engaged with any of the social enterprise capital funders that are out there now, starting to pop up a bit in New Zealand?
Thanks for asking. I did run out of time. Yeah, I have the requests to go. We have engaged the social enterprise universe within New Zealand, and found it very difficult we don't really meet criteria for funding that's enough to take us another step. You know, $1,000 here or there is kind, but it really doesn't even make a dent. So yes, I'm here to ask for collaboration more than anything else. We intend very much to install this facility as soon as we can, but primarily we'd love to collaborate with Nelson City Council, and that would require some investment from the council, yes.
Councillor Courtney?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm not a member of this committee, but I do appreciate the opportunity to ask a question of Ben. Ben, what a wonderful story you tell, and so well. Thank you very much for coming in. Councillor Rutledge did touch on my question. I was wondering, you know, just how could we encourage you? How could we help you advance your dream, your big dream? But could we do it through supporting you in getting your message out? I'm thinking through Live Nelson or something like Live Nelson or Live Nelson, whatever you call it, our publication. Would that help you?
Yes, any raising in awareness is received extremely gratefully. Our biggest challenge at the moment is space, and also handling it's classified as a toxic waste due to pathogens and high bacterial count. So really, people that are handling this volume of compost are putting their own selves at risk. I take PPE very highly and take it very seriously, and we all wear protective clothing. And really, if we start handling any more, it becomes a real danger to people, and health and safety is important. So going in vessel contains that, and also taking the temperature of the compost to a certain temperature pasteurizes it, and thus it becomes a safe product at the end. If we start producing tons and tons of compost that hasn't necessarily reached the temperature, we're actually providing a dangerous product to be selling people, because it just harbors pathogens and it breeds the bacteria that's dangerous to us. So I really encourage you to look seriously into funding this. It's a small facility. It can handle 1,000 homes and is independent and modular. So the Waste Minimisation Fund actually will probably fund any expansion, but to get to that point, we need to show them a working model. And all I really need is somewhere to put it that's safe, and this is where this is all derived from.
Right, thank you. Just a quick question, Councillor Laurie.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Great presentation.
Thank you.
There's 21,000, through the chair, there's 21,000 homes in Nelson.
Yeah.
1,000 homes.
Yeah.
I think it's great, but it doesn't make me think, yeah, let's chuck lots of money at this. But what about a location? What if the council was to be able to provide you with a site and possibly, I don't know, power, or that kind of support, rather than ratepayers' money up front? Would that make a difference?
It would definitely make a difference, yes. Thank you for the question. Our research and inquiry into those homes really shows us less than half will sign up anyway, because most people would like to do it themselves. And then probably less than half of those remaining half will be able to afford it. So economy with numbers would hope that that second half would be interested, but that 20,000 is actually 10,000, and that still only takes us to what, $1 million for 10 facilities. So it's still pretty good value.
Right, thank you. Look, we are seriously over time, I'm afraid, so anyone further questions, if they'd like to make contact with Ben at a later time, that would be appreciated. Thank you so much for your presentation. I know a lot of effort's gone into it, and I appreciate your supporters being here as well. So thank you.
Thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now go on to item 5, confirmation of minutes, pages 6 to 14. Would someone like to move that that's a true and correct record of proceedings last month? Been moved. We have a seconder. Councillor Rutledge. No discussion relating to it. I'll put the motion. All those in favour? Against? Carried. Thank you. We now go to the Chairperson's report, and before I give my report, there has been an incident this morning on Te Hunanui Drive of a very serious nature relating to our infrastructure. It occurred in the early hours, 4 o'clock or thereabouts, and Mr. Levertis has been involved with that, and I'd like him to give a quick report and an update as to where we are.
And thank you through the chair. Yes, as the chair indicated, there was an accident in the early hours of the morning in the corner of Green and Te Hunanui Drive. A vehicle containing car batteries was impacted by another heavy vehicle, and that has resulted in the spillage of approximately, we're estimating at this moment in time, about 300 litres of sulfuric acid into our stormwater system. The fire are currently leading the response, and they have an incident control centre out on site. They have people in protective clothing, hazardous clothing. We were called out to site this morning to coordinate the flow of traffic, in particular the heavy vehicles, because there's only certain roads that our HPMVs, the high productivity motor vehicles, can use. A lot of them were parked up, waiting to go. We coordinated that this morning, and we got, after ascertaining the assets under the ground, that Muritai could be used, and we imposed a 30-kilometre speed limit to keep the traffic moving. So that was the first point of call. The second was to find out whether any of the sulfuric acid had made it into our stormwater system and where that was heading. We are confident that we have that contained and it has not flowed out into any of our freshwater areas. The process from now, and I have staff on site coordinating that with the police and fire, is that the batteries will be contained and they will be put into a staging area, whereafter they will be removed from site in a controlled fashion so as to not cause additional leakage. We are in contact with a specialist chemist through the fire in Australia in terms of what the mitigation measures are, and we will now progress to ensuring that we contain the area, which we believe is quite small, so it's in the system. We need to neutralize that, and we need to flush that out, and we need to try and do that in a controlled fashion. But as I said, we are working with police and fire. Fire are controlling this, and we will just work with them in terms of ensuring that we mitigate that. I understand the driver of the one vehicle is in hospital. I don't know the situation, but I think he's stable. And of course, we'll leave the investigations up to the police. We are just there to make sure that we control the infrastructure. So not a good start to the morning, but it seems that nothing has escaped into the estuary or to the fresh water, and we will have a plan in place to control it.
So the question, of course, is long-term, is that battery acid and concrete pipes don't like each other. I know well from my own work involvement, concrete and acid. So that's where we are there, but it is comforting to know that we have procedures in place to handle these sorts of things, as unexpected as they are, and it is comforting that we've gone right through to Australia when the need has been there to get advice as to the specialist nature of how we control such an incident. So thank you for that, Alec. Then we go to my chairperson's report, which I table. It relates to the Te Hunanui stormwater detention pond, which is also the modeller's pond. And that, just so that you're aware, all the stormwater that comes from areas such as the incident that we've just described works its way through to a massive underground tank in Centennial Park. And when that reaches a certain level, it then discharges into the the detention pond, the modeller's pond. So the implications of this spill, if it was raining at the time, would have been hugely worse. So that's the process. So we have the pond, and we know that there has been a lot of planning going into where we are right at the moment. So just briefly through there, we cleaned the pond earlier at the end of last year, early this year. We've obtained a resource consent to undertake the trial of this biological product to reduce the algal problem that we have in the pond. There's been a huge amount of pre-trial monitoring and testing to establish a base level of where the current receiving environment is, so that we've got a comparison once the tests start. We've installed all the infrastructure in place to undertake this trial, which involves a circulation pump so that the brew, when it's injected into the pond, is able to mix in a controlled way. It's a very fluid situation, excuse the pun, but essentially what happens is that we have a pond which varies all the time in its chemical makeup. So it's got obviously a mixture of salt water in there, but we also have the stormwater, which is contaminated off all the roads and roofs all through that area of Tahuna. So we are monitoring what happens there. And we're at a point now where on Monday morning, if we've had no influence from this recent incident this morning, it will go ahead as scheduled and commence the dosing on Monday. So that's just the latest update on that for you. I'm happy to take any questions if anyone has it, but that's essentially where we are. Councillor Matheson.
Thank you, Mr Chair. Just on your report 3.6, as part of the pre-trial testing, you've found a nutrient-rich water entering the pond. I had a conversation with an ex-city councillor of some years regarding the possibility that we are getting something from somewhere. And I also obtained a map of the old water areas, streams and gravels and things. Has anybody gone any further to try and find out what it is? It was hinted at because Beach Road was where the sea went to, that there were a lot of old septic tanks and things that probably disappeared over time. Has anybody found a source or?
That is an area of suspicion. As to what goes back a long way. We've looked at also the possibility of any industrial activity that may have impact on it, but essentially if you wander through the pond with some waders, you can strike places where it suddenly gets warm, and when we cleaned the pond out we can actually see like little volcanoes in several places which arouse suspicion. And we've since investigated a wee bit more, and it's definitely coming up. The pond varies for lots of reasons, but it's just earth on the walls and the bottom of it, so it's not lined in any way. And so we get evaporation occurring from the surface. We get this groundwater coming up. There we have the influence of the tides. So it's a very dynamic sort of situation that we're faced with, and this is why the monitoring is being done as a result. So that's the answer to that one. But we are onto that. Councillor Courtney, sorry.
Thank you, Mr Chair. This is really good news. Mr Chair, I know it's early days, but are you optimistic about this trial? Can we be optimistic about it?
Absolutely. The information that it came from was essentially when I attended a Three Waters conference in Hamilton last year, and a presentation was made at that conference by Dr. Simon Tannock, and as a result of that we have followed this up. He has shown evidence of the effect of his product. It's technology which is highly specialised. It's nanotechnology. It's minute amounts of material will go in to be mixed. Essentially what it's doing is that it's starving the food source of the algae, and that's basically how it works. Dr. Tannock has had huge success in Australia with septic tank systems, sewerage systems, freshwater fish farming, this sort of thing. He's currently engaged also with looking into the Lake Ellesmere algae problem. Lake Taupo is another one, and also Port of Tauranga. So it's emerging technology, and we're really confident that it will work. We won't get an immediate response to what's happening because there's such small quantities involved, but there will be a trend occurring, and it could, as the information says, could be up to 18 months, this trial. Councillor Noonan?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, I'm just wondering if someone can remind me what the budget was that we gave to this, and how are we going with that budget?
Yes, I think Mr. Levertis can answer.
So through the chair, we're estimating that this trial, and that does account for some of the risk assessments, could be in the order of about 135,000. We do have a budget in the current financial year to cover that. We don't anticipate that we will spend the full 135,000, but there has been additional work that has been identified by the working party. For example, the additional cleaning out of the pond, which we've just recently undertaken. That was on the advice of Dr. Tannock, which he believes will give us a greater degree of success. So we are taking our advice from Dr. Tannock, and yes, there has been additional work, but our estimate is potentially in order of about 135. But that's also taking into account other potential expenditure that may arise as a result of algae blooms, pumps, etc.
Just follow up, Mr. Chair.
Sorry.
Sorry, I thought the budget was in the 67 or something thousand, so we haven't had anything come back to us to increase that budget, so I'm just a bit confused.
Yes, what happened was that we were alerted initially to the cost from the engineers of being just over 200,000. As a result of inquiries relating to that, it was reduced to 65. We've started into it and learned that some of the items that were reduced from the 200 figure down to 65, in fact, have had to be reinstated that we weren't aware of. And maybe Mr. Levertis can explain in more detail.
I think through the chair, yes. This has been a journey for us in terms of trying to understand what the trial will entail. But because it is a trial, and we are anticipating that we will ascertain the success as we move, there are a number of things that have had to have been undertaken. We've done that in conjunction with the working party, and there's additional works out on site that when you actually started doing the work in electrical supply, getting the equipment over, the issue with the seepage through the pond, those are all things that have been ascertained. But as we've gone through the process, the actual costs to get this trial up and running have been slightly higher than we would have anticipated. We still believe that as officers that we have faith in the trial. We have absolute faith in Dr. Tannock, and that we are really, really hopeful that this trial will work. We believe that that's the point of the trial, between 12 and 18 months, and we will be in a good position to ascertain the success of that. And we still think that this is a good spend of money to be able to get us into that space.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, I really just want to concentrate on what we've allocated for this, and it looks like it's more than twice as much, and I'm a bit sensitive to money at the moment, so I just want to dig a little bit deeper on this, if you don't mind. How much did we allocate, and how much? Why is there a difference? And we haven't been asked for that difference. That's what my dilemma is.
So through the chair, we've been working through the working party, which has Councillor Walker and Councillor Skinner, as well as two representatives of the individuals from the Models Society and the Business Association, and that group was tasked with ensuring that the trial can be tasked with ensuring that the trial can progress. As I indicated, the budget for this work is 150,000, and initially we indicated that when we presented our cost estimates to the working party, that was in the order of about 60,000. But as a result of the work and in conjunction with the advice given by Dr. Simon Tannock, the reality is that the cost to actually undertake this have slightly increased. So we've been monitoring those, and we've been working with the working party to ensure that work can proceed, and that's why this is on the agenda today. And we will be keeping this committee updated on the cost and the outcome of the trial as we progress.
Mr. Chair, sorry. I just want to know, have the amount that we budgeted, are we okay on the budget? That's what I want to know. The allocated amount that we've got as at now, is that where it should be?
I've just had advice that perhaps what we should do is to call a quick recess so that we can clarify things and answer your questions then. So we'll call a recess. We are waiting for clarification on figures at the moment, so we will let that matter lie for a moment and we'll come back to it. Is the... Okay, we will allow that then. Yep.
So, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm just wondering why, while we are carrying out the specialised nanotechnology trial, are we also investigating the costs involved in returning the area to a natural environment? Because as I remember it, that was something we were planning to be looking at while we did this work, so that if it isn't a success, we can get on with Plan B.
Okay, the situation there is that when we learnt about this possible biological fix, all our efforts have gone into that. There has been an element of costing done, is that right, Mr. Levertis, for a possible estuarine involvement, but it doesn't have high priority at the moment.
So through the Chair, that's correct. Our main priority has been focusing on the trial, and we haven't undertaken much work on returning to the estuarine at this moment in time. We really want to ascertain whether this trial is going to be a success or not, because that'll dictate where our final solution may or may not be.
So, with respect, we made an agreement. We agreed that we would be doing a business case for an estuarine environment. When did we make the decision to stop doing that?
So through the Chair, the decision was made that we would do a business case, and the business case would incorporate all options, including the return to estuarine as well as the trial. It's not just a one solution option. In order for us to undertake that business case, we need to actually understand whether the trial is a success or not, because that will determine what the final solution will be. So if it's not a success, then clearly there will be other options that we will need to be explored, of which one will be returning to the estuarine, as well as comparing it to the other options on the table. But in order for us to be able to do a comprehensive business case, we need to ascertain whether the trial is a success, because that could really influence what the final outcome could be, because we need to cost that out. So if it does work, we need to do a long-term costing of that. If it doesn't work, then clearly we need to look at other parts. But the trial is part of that business case.
So I have to express my frustration at that situation. I understand the logic of it, but what I fear is that we will get to the end of this 12-month to 18-month specialist nanotechnology trial, and we won't be able to go with Plan B because we won't have a Plan B, and we'll end up where we started when this council was wrestling with this issue back in 2013. In fact, it goes back decades, so it's a very frustrating position we find ourselves in.
I share your frustrations. We have our CEO would like to make a statement.
So we will report back on all the options, but as Mr. Levertis said, this is an exciting option for us. It looked on the surface to be substantially cheaper than any of the others, so we're running with the trial. But as that trial comes to an end, yes, we will have to cost up all the options and report it back to council. But as Alex says, until we know the results of that trial, there's no point in doing all the other work. And realistically, at the moment, the projects team is so short of resources that doing a piece of work that I don't need the answer for at least another 12 months, it's not a priority.
Clearly.
We will have a trend within a few months as to the likely success. You know, it's not, you know, we will have a trend. Yeah. Councillor Barker, you...
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was absolutely astounded to see your unexpected discovery in 3.6. And I say that because I know the old timers of Nelson said that there was a thermal water under Te Hunanui years ago. And I would like to know that we might do a little bit of research into finding out what is the source of this warmer water. Is it a natural phenomenon, or is it something occurring that what man has done? Because there were big plans to turn Te Hunanui, digressing a little bit, into a spa area at one stage, using thermal hot water. And this is the first discovery, or the first evidence, to my knowledge, that it's actually there. So it would be great to find out if there's any potential in it. It could be an amazing thing for Nelson.
Yeah, it is not hot, all right? It is a different temperature. The pond ambient temperature. It's noticeable if you walk over it. But yes, it is part of what's happening. Madam Mayor, you had a question at this stage, or no?
My question was just to get the numbers in a tidy
thank you.
form.
No, we'll come back to it. So what we will do now is that we will proceed with the rest of the agenda, and then when we have the information that we're seeking, we will come back through the Chief Executive during the meeting. So we now go to item 7, pages, this is the Solid Waste Asset Management Plan, and pages 15 to 17, and we have Mr. Thiart to speak to it. Are there any alterations or additions to your report?
There's nothing. The plan basically has been unaltered since the LTP because the LTP deliberations did not have any effect on the solid waste activity. Any questions?
Sorry, Johan, can you just please bring your mic closer to your... There you go, thank you.
So there were no changes following the LTP because the LTP did not have any effect on the asset management plan.
So we have the plan. I take it that everyone has read.
Happy to move, Mr. Chair, both the recommendation that we receive and that recommendation of council.
So it's been moved by Councillor Rutledge, seconded by Councillor Noonan for both items. Thank you for both there. So is there any further discussion? No further discussion. I'll put it then. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Carried. Thank you. Item 7. Now we go to item 8, which is the Water Supply Asset Management Plan, and invite Mr. Ruffle to come forward. Thank you. Are there any alterations or omissions? I know you've got a hefty document here for us to have gone through. So if you like to speak to that, thank you.
Mr. Chair, yes, this report is in 2 parts. The first is, as with Mr. Thiart, the need to adopt our water supply asset management plan upon the adoption of the long-term plan, and the second is to deal with the issue of the replacement of our residential water meters, with the recommendation that we replace them like for like with manual read meters. There were some very small changes made through the LTP to the water supply asset management plan, and they're set out in the report. And I'm happy just to answer any questions.
All right, thank you. Councillor Matheson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I read this with interest, Phil. Can you just, I see we're going to have some automated meters, and the majority are going to be manual. Can you just expand a little bit on that for me?
Mr. Chair, yes, 2 years ago I came to council and asked for this budget to install a trial of automated read meters on our residential properties in the Wood. We put in 50 of these meters. The main reason for that is that the automated read meters simply aren't something that we see a lot of in New Zealand in this residential scale. And until we actually get some sort of feel for the software requirements, how we read them and how they perform in time, I didn't feel really that confident in pursuing the meters. So we've got 50 in. We've tested the software, and we've tested the actual reading wands, the automated wands for that. And they work quite well. They haven't come without their challenges. There are some members of the public that are a bit concerned about the electronics around their properties, but by and large they're working quite well.
What, do they feel they're going to be zapped or something?
Mr. Chair, really...
we have automated meters for power.
We do indeed, yes, and I believe the same people have expressed their concerns about that. No matter, Mr. Chair, sorry, we as part of the rollout, just for those 50, the people that came to us were not just from the Wood, actually, they were across the city. but they had the same sort of philosophical concerns about the level of electronic transmissions that are occurring in the environment.
Councillor McGurk.
Yeah, thanks through you, Mr Chair, and thanks for your indulgence. I'm not a member of the committee. Just following up on some of the comments that Councillor Matheson made. I'm just wondering, you know, is there the opportunity to revisit this decision? Because if you know you got the manual water meters, replacing them with the automatic read ones, is that an option? You know, I appreciate the concern was that the cost of rolling it out over a period of time was significant, and I think there wasn't the appetite to do that. But can we actually slow this down a wee bit and replace the manual read ones with an automatic one when they are due for replacement? Is that an option?
Mr Chair, yes, to date we haven't bought any more than those 50 trial meters. We're just in a position in this financial year where we do have to make the decision about what we do. So really, Councillor are welcome to really make whatever decision they wish. We have just set out the basis of the building business case that we developed internally with staff, and the results of that are set out in the report.
Yes.
But almost any option is available to council.
The reason I'm going with this is that with the manual read, we read the meters twice a year?
Yes, Mr Chair, every 6 months.
Yeah. So it's a bit like with the electricity meter. The guy from wherever our power company turns up and reads my meter in June and December, and I get a bill and I pay it. But I've got no idea about the consumption or what the trends are. You know, the power account that I get now, I can actually monitor almost on an hour on a basis and adjust my habits accordingly. I think I'm just wondering, are we losing an opportunity to start upgrading the automatic meter reading with a view of sort of addressing the water unaccounted use?
Mr Chair, the current manual read meters are available to every property owner by lifting the lid and looking at them.
Yeah.
They can go down any time they like. They can sit there all day if they want and check their water usage. The automated meters we'd be proposing to read quarterly if we were going to install them. In our business case, we looked at reading them every 3 months. Anything much more than that is slightly inefficient from our financial point of view. So we'd read them 3 months compared with 6 months. There would assuredly be some ability to reduce the levels of water loss that we have on private properties for that. We might halve it.
Yeah.
Economically, that halving might save us about $50,000 a year. It wouldn't save council $50,000 a year, but it would save the property owners who pay those bills about that $50,000 a year. The thing I just couldn't get past is the cost, the actual annual operating costs for these, with the depreciation and the increased interest costs of at least $300,000 a year. Yeah. I found it very disappointing. I truly did. I liked the automated meter read ideas, but I can't get past the cost.
Yeah, thanks for your comment. The one in 3.7 in the report that you talked about was the sort of the middle sentence there. Some contractors are quite responsive in terms of metering, but those working on non-projects, what's the sticking point with that?
Mr Chair, there's a bit of crystal ball gazing through there. I suspect that for decades, contractors have been used to just simply opening up a fire hydrant when they want to get water, whatever they need. And now we've come along and said the only way we want you to open those hydrants is through a metered standpipe, and by the way, we want you to give us some records of your use. And it, like all new things, it just takes a while to get everyone used to a new way of doing things. And until we actually make a nuisance of ourselves with the contractors, I just don't think we're going to get any records. So we need to move to that next stage of having them take it seriously.
Councillor Rutledge.
Thank you. Phil, is this an all or nothing process? So if we were replacing worn out manual ones randomly as they come up with automated ones, would that cause a lot more cost and complexity in the network, or is that a way of slowly modernising, going to this modern technology?
Mr. Chair, it's not one that I'd recommend. It leaves you sort of with the worst of both cases. It means we have to maintain a separate contractor to go and read the manual meters around the city, and we have to introduce, and it probably could be the same contractor, but we also have to introduce the automated read technology at the same time. We end up with an awkwardness. The manual meters that we've got will slowly degrade with time. Their reading accuracy will be less as we go on now, from now on in. There'll be a group of people with flash up-to-date automated read meters which will be reading accurately and who will be paying bills based on those meters. I don't like the hybrid, Mr. Chairman.
That makes sense to me. I just wanted to clarify that. Thank you. The other rationale that's been put forward for going to the automated meters by some people is that they believe it will help us track down these unaccounted water losses faster and more efficiently. What's your view on that, and has your view on that been worked into the business case costings?
Mr. Chair, the water losses that I report to Council on fairly regularly are hovering around that 2.7 million cubic metres. And that 2.7 million cubic metres is the difference between what we deliver out of our water treatment plant and the accumulated totals of the metres that we read. So all of the leaks on private properties are all in that metered amount. The 2.7 million cubic metres is all through the network somewhere before it gets to those private properties. So running the automated read meters on the private residential properties improves the ability for those properties to manage and deal with their water losses after the meter, but it does nothing for that 2.7 million cubic metres that we can't track at the moment.
Thank you, very clear.
Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Phil, as you know, I've had some correspondence around this matter from the Nelson Residents Association, and they did point out quite rightly that there was a workshop held where elected members requested for a business case to come back. Is the business case embedded in the asset management plan? Obviously, you've got some summary points here, but I haven't got the actual business case. So where would I find that?
Madam Mayor, the actual business case is available, and absolutely we can make copies available to the councillors. It's not a document that we embed into the asset management plans. It's the results of that document that are in the asset management plan, and likewise the results of that document have been put into this report.
Right, just through you, Mr. Chair, the dilemma I have, though, is this is a matter that was, and I believe rightly picked up by the Nelson Residents Association to say there was an expectation from elected members that a business case would come back. It hasn't come back, and you're giving us some summary here. We've had some submissions through the long-term plan specifically on this point in around whether as a smart little city we should be looking at manual meters, whether that really is consistent with our direction. Through that correspondence, through Mr. Chair, Mr. Steve Cross had expressed that he had some knowledge and experience in this area. Have we engaged with him to talk through the business case? Because sometimes I think these things are far best rather, that a face-to-face sit down and working it through and is the best way to approach these issues. So has that happened? Because I'm just feeling a little bit like we're sitting here today. I can see the correspondence that I've sent back to the Residents Association. I can see what they've sent to me. They were on the money in terms of what was meant to happen. And today I was actually expecting to see a business case rather than a summary of it inside the report. So first thing is just have we engaged with and actually to try and resolve and have this discussion. Otherwise, I think we just leave an outstanding issue that elected members are then going to have to come around again and address. And I think far better we're proactive and we get on with those conversations.
Mr. Chair, the business case, the documents, the discussions around the workshops have all been provided to Mr. Cross. So he has copies of those. I myself have not sat down with him face to face and discussed the matter. More than happy to do that if councillors wish me to do that. The information in the business case, although it goes in many, many pages, the important things about the business cases are its conclusions. And they are, in fact, sitting in the report and in the asset management plan. Once again, I have no problem providing the hard copies of the business cases to councillors if they wish to read it. No problem at all.
Thank you through you, Mr. Chair. So just in terms of that matter, I actually do think this is one of the situations where this is actually about, we get lots of issues like this in the infrastructure area where people have got views and they've got concerns and they've got all sorts of things, and the most effective approach that I've seen is actually when we often get out of the building and go and have the face-to-face conversations and actually, you know, and if there's a difference of professional view, that's fine, that can be recognised. But if Mr. Cross has got some specialist expertise that he wants to share with us, then I'm quite happy for, I would sort of support that happening, given they've actively come in, they've submitted, they've followed up, and quite rightly pointed out that there was some further reporting that needed to come to this committee.
We have still Councillor Noonan.
Yes, I am still here, Mr. Chair. My question relates, and through you, to the to 3.7, where the staff are having challenges having the contractors record their volumes of water. So my question is, do the contractors have to apply to use the water when they're going to go and do a job? Do they have to actually let the council know that they're going?
Mr. Chair, yes, that is the basis of our water supply bylaw, that anyone accessing water except through the normal metered means needs to let us know. We don't ask the contractors to let us know every single time they want to do it. We just try to set some constraints around them, that they use a standpipe, that we know where it came from, that they actually have a meter on it and backflow prevention devices in through there so that we don't actually run the risk of recontaminating our water supply, and that they just let us know how much water they take.
I'm just wondering, Mr. Chair, if the contractors realise how important it is for us to try and find these leaks, and whether they don't understand that we are actually struggling to locate where they are, and it would be helpful for them to give us some accurate data.
Mr. Chair, I agree. We will go and speak to them. No problem at all. I think that's the best way to achieve some of these things, as the Mayor pointed out.
Thank you. Councillor Skinner?
Well, thank you. Just briefly, I think for that refresher on the water meters, I was too surprised and disappointed that there was an operating cost large over automated. Is that because if you had a large number of houses, if you had 100,000 houses, then it would be cost effective? Because also an interesting comment that not much of New Zealand is using it, so there's good reason.
Well, Mr. Chair, there's always economies of scale, and unquestionably one of the biggest costs in this, of course, is the purchase of them. We expect to be able to buy one of the manual meters for somewhere between $70 and $100, and we're looking at $200 to $250 for one of the automated read meters. As they become more mainstream, we would absolutely expect that cost to come down.
Through Mr. Chair, the operating cost was also high. Was that the monitoring or the software or the hardware complexity?
Mr. Chair, the operating costs include things like the interest costs for the loan to buy it. That includes the depreciation, the early depreciation of the 2,500 manual meters that we would have to remove. But there is a saving to us from not having to have manual reading of the meters, but it's not a zero cost, that we do have to actually have the cost of the automated reading built in there as well.
So my final question, Mr. Ruffle and Mr. Chair, would be, from your advice, it may be worth looking at this again sometime in the future as technologies change or the number of residents we have or demands. But I'll leave that to yourselves and staff to consider.
Mr. Buckley.
So, coming back to the lack of a business case, that was my decision. I was aware there was a direction from a workshop to bring a business case, but in that if that's not a formal resolution, I considered that providing a summary in the report was a better way to go, particularly when you already had 370 pages of attachments with this report. I have read the business case and I agree with its conclusions. I know that there is a feeling that these smart meters are the solution, but bear in mind these still have to be read by a wand. Someone still has to go out and they're just easier to read. So that this option still isn't sending us the data electronically. So it won't change the way we operate significantly. It'll simply push up our operating costs because we'll have that roughly $3 million more debt against our system and more software to support. If the councillors wanted to make sure that the public were more aware of the water usage, then we could read quarterly, which would still increase our operating costs, but would be a quicker way to go and reduce the size of the bill that people received. And that's something we could consider as part of the annual plan. But my strong view that is the smart decision is to stick with manual meters. I'm not aware of many others in New Zealand going to electronic meters at the moment. We would certainly be at the leading edge. As you know, I have a discomfort about being at the leading edge with that scale of investment. So that's why this report is pitched the way it is. But if you wish, we can distribute the business case to all the councillors so they can have a read of it if they wish. We can put it on our website if you wish.
Thank you. Councillor Barker.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I would like some assurance that we are continuing to have discussion and dialogue with Network Tasman and Nelson Electricity. In the time before the electronic meters were installed by the network, there was discussion on the possibilities of shared use meters. And I would like to think that we're still looking at the possibilities because technology is always changing. And I think we did miss the boat a little bit in the opportunities that were possible to have shared use meters and consequently shared costs.
Madam Mayor.
Thank you. That's just one of the other questions that I had for Mr. Ruffle. So that is around the project looking at, there's a couple of different organisations that have, I think, approached council around opportunity for shared use. So I just wondered if Mr. Ruffle could give us an update on where things are at and whether that's something that we've got some potential possibility with.
Mr. Chair, yes indeed, we are continually discussing with Network Tasman. We're on first name terms with their operational staff through there, and I was speaking to him maybe 3 weeks ago. We got a long way down the path with Network Tasman, and their opportunity and for our opportunity to piggyback on their network is still live. What's holding it up, of course, is finding a suitable water meter that has a transmission device with an acceptable frequency for the New Zealand network. And their system, which is working fine for their power meters, hasn't yet had an integration opportunity for water meters. But it doesn't mean it won't happen. It just means that their Australian company that they're working with is just a little bit behind their power meter company. The other opportunity that exists for us, of course, is with Spark and for their some of their low power range initiatives that their business area is rolling out, and that certainly remains an opportunity for council. It's, once again, in its infancy. We would be really right at the front of things if we move down that path. But that's a decision for the future.
So a follow-up question. In that case, Mr. Ruffle, what we're looking at, and I think I found it in the plan, and it's just highlighted, it just says the future proposed renewal of residential water meters scheduled over a 3-year period from 1920 at approximately 1.1 million per year will be based on like-for-like replacement. So it's a 3-year period. Is there value here in deferring this for another year, just to see where we can get to with the technology? Because I'm conscious that there's some real movement in this space in terms of smart data technology, and I'm just feeling like and I don't understand because the risks of deferment. So the options would be we move to smart meters, we go for like, or we defer this for a year just to see what evolves in terms of that technology. Can you just talk us through the risks around that?
Yes, certainly, Mr. Chair. The existing meter network that we have is about 20 years old. It by any measure has reached the end of its reasonable service life. We're replacing somewhere between 100 and 150, maybe 200 metres each year, and the risk that council faces if we defer another year is that the metres will be a year older, their reading accuracy will degrade a wee bit, and will replace maybe at max another 150 metres. The risk is not great if you defer. It's not a great risk.
Councillor McGurk.
Yeah, thanks again for your indulgence, Mr. Chair. I'm just going on to the Three Waters review that currently there's percolating around in government, and just looking at your report there in terms of, I suppose, the first cab off the rank in that water review will be water quality. And I'm just looking at the measures you've got here, and I'm just looking for that assurance that we are able to supply a safe and reliable water supply to our community, regardless of what happens going forward. I see we were graded at, was it A, B or something like that, so we're not quite at the top rate with the Ministry of Health. But I'm just thinking that there's going to be quite I'm guessing, reading the tea leaves, there's going to be quite a lift in the regulatory regime in terms of regulation and compliance. How are we placed for that?
Mr. Chair, yes. At the moment, I have confirmed with Council in the past that my belief is that the Nelson City Council is exceptionally well placed in terms of a water supply authority. We've accepted, really since the inception of Nelson, that our primary water source will be river sources, and the river sources simply aren't secure, and we've known it and we've planned for it. Our water treatment plant runs an ultrafiltration system, and then it chlorinates the water. So I'm absolutely confident that our source of water through to the city absolutely warrants that A grading that the Ministry of Health have given us. The water network is not at that A level, and councillors will be well aware of the discoloured water complaints that we've had in the past, and they will exist for a wee bit longer until such time as we really renew all our network and get rid of most of our cast iron pipes. Yeah. There are some things that we can do at our water treatment plant around maybe changing our coagulant chemicals, and we can spend more time looking at scouring and cleaning our pipes, but some of those discoloured water complaints will remain with us. But the water is safe. It meets the drinking water standards regularly. We monitor it. In one of my earlier reports, I talked through how often we monitor and where we monitor, and particularly with our residual chlorine levels. Really, I don't know much what more I can really say. I think we're well positioned.
Thank you. Okay. Councillor Metz.
Oh, sorry. No, I'll leave it. It's probably just a bit off topic.
Thank you, Mr Chair. I totally agree with Mr Ruffles' summary of our water treatment. Excellent plant, well managed, probably a bit of an icon for other local authorities around New Zealand. Some very forward-thinking councillors of the day. Can I just go to 4.3, and you have got updates on 5 areas which you've made to the plan since the version that went to the LTP. That's financial risk, future demand, asset and levels. Can you just summarise quickly for me, Phil, any areas there that you feel we should know about that you've made changes to?
Mr Chair, really those changes fall into 2 basic categories. The first is that we needed to make sure that the asset management plans aligned with the long-term plans. So we, once the long-term plan is adopted, we've gone back over and made sure that all of our financial figures within the asset management plan match the long-term plan. Risk management, we had to incorporate some parts into the asset management plan that responded to the Havelock North inquiry. So I've updated it. There's a section of text in through there that talks through where central government got to with that inquiry and really the point that they were looking at this stage of ensuring that the country's water supplies are safe and thinking about regulators. I don't think there's anything there that Council won't have heard about in the past. Future demand, we need to upgrade our growth projections. It was once again to match the projections that Council adopted through the long-term plan process. Asset management maturity is just recognising that that all of our asset management plans needed to be aligned with the same structure, saying the same things, and I needed to put that section into our water supply asset management plan. It was a copy and paste out of our wastewater and stormwater, just to keep them the same. And the levels of service, we did change those slightly. We needed to report on where we'd got to. The long-term plan had an update, and we needed to make sure the same update went into our asset management plans. And we made some of our target measures harder on us as well.
Thank you. And just to follow up, really in relation to the Three Waters debate that's going on at the moment, Mr Chair, there has been indications from the government that they may be looking at the management of water, potable water in a different form. Have we had any updates as to the thinking from anybody, or maybe Her Worship the Mayor can indicate or tell me whether the local government are looking at this issue of ownership, management and distribution changes, or maybe the Chief Executive, who appears to be of some knowledge?
Yes, so this was discussed at the LGNZ conference, and the Minister addressed it in her speech as well, is that following on from the Havelock North water inquiry and some of the recommendations there, the government is, and one of them was better regulation of the water industry, and the other one was bigger water supply authorities. And so the government is looking at its options in that space in terms of should they be establishing an independent regulator to monitor water quality, because at the moment water supply falls across 5 or 6 different government ministers, health, fire. There is a range of areas that monitor some aspect of water supply. So they are looking to, I think, announce their initial thinkings in later this year on a regulator, with an intention that if that's favourable, they would probably be moving over the next year or two towards some form of regulator. As part of that, there's also a conversation about if smaller councils have to bring their water supplies up to a standard, there could be a cost on small communities. And an aggregation of water supplies is also being discussed. That's quite serious aggregation. I have seen maps where the South Island is split along Super 15 boundaries, so God help us, we'll be part of the Crusaders water supply. As a Highlander supporter, that's unacceptable.
It'd be a winning combat.
So, yes,
Can we ask the Chief Executive to watch his language, please?
And the other thing is they're also wondering then if there's a regulator, should it be for wastewater as well? And if there's aggregation, should that be the three waters? But if there's going to be change, it will happen slowly. Realistically, you would have to review your drinking water standards. You've got to set up some sort of regulatory agency within the government. That could be 2 to 3 years away. And if aggregation was something that did occur, that would be even further away.
Can I just ask a final question with regard to this issue, because I don't think we can walk away from the possibilities. Has the government, from your information, looked at the ownership factor with regard to water?
Yeah, one of the things the Minister made very clear is public ownership is paramount. Ownership of water supplies would stay in public ownership. And one of the things LGNZ is seeking is strong confirmation is when you say public ownership, you mean local government ownership. Yes.
Councillor Rutledge.
Thank you. So I'd just like to move the first part that we receive the report, so we can keep this moving.
Do we have a seconder? Seconded Councillor Skinner.
Thank you. And
so we'll cover that first. All those in favour of receiving the report?
Aye.
Against? Carried.
And then I've just got a question for Mr. Ruffle through you, Mr. Chairperson, and just want some assurance, Mr. Ruffle, that in our deliberations and our changes to the long-term plan, we haven't made any decisions that might impact our ability to for future growth or freeing up land supply that we might not have properly thought through. So just wanting that assurance that that what we now have in this water space isn't going to impinge our ability to free up land supply.
Mr. Chair, I keep quite a close eye on really supply and demand of water around the town, and I'm not aware of any decision that council has made either in the last 10 years or is expected to be making in the next 6 months that would constrain growth around the city. I absolutely understand that we don't know where the growth will come from, and that we will find when growth pops its head up that some of our pipes just won't be big enough to push water into it. But there'll be an operational issue that we'll easily be able to overcome.
Madam Mayor, I was going to have a break so that we could have a chance to discuss during the break as to whether I get a feeling you may wish to move an amendment to the recommendation relating to meters, or would you like to speak now?
Well, no, I'm conscious that what we're doing today is picking up what's in the long-term plan, but I'm conscious also that we missed a step in getting to that and this is the dilemma, that the Residents Association had presumed that we'd received a business case and that was all hidden away, and we squirreled away and made decisions on that in a workshop and all sorts of things, but we hadn't actually had the business case, and now we've had it reported today sort of after the LTP. So the LTP made some presumptions on the basis of continuing with the manual water meters, I think, so that's what the numbers would have said, but we hadn't had this discussion. So it's possible, I just want to check with Mr. Ruffle, that if I've got the years right, so it's 1920 before you start that process, then in fact we've got some time now to think it to actually, if I want to pursue the technology side a little bit more, I've got a little bit of time to do that. And he's shaking his head to say I'm not.
Sorry, Madam, Mr. Chair. Sorry, the first money for the water meters is in 1819, the year we currently sit in. So there's 3 years of capital expenditure. 18, 19, 19, 20 and 2021.
Okay, in that case, Mr Chair, I'll just take you to page 102 of the, of the agenda, which is the AMP. So it's page 13 of the AMP and the highlighted text. And it just says that the timing is that's scheduled over a 3-year period from 1920. So I took it that I had time for a conversation, further conversation. If that's not the case, then may need an adjournment.
Mr Chair, my apologies. Yes, the money starts in 1819.
Oh, so 102 is not correct then?
102 is not correct.
Oh dear. All right. Okay, so I guess I would prefer that somebody cross-reference that, because that's a summary in the front, to make sure that the tables are actually correct before we adopt it.
So, shall we have a short adjournment?
Yeah, I think that'll be useful. And just I just want to come to the Three Waters matter, just very quickly, slightly off topic, but important in relation to this. You recall that I wanted to do a briefing for you at the end of the council meeting, but due to the length of that meeting, we didn't get that in. The GAs are finding a time to slot that in, because it is really important that all of council understands what's sitting in that Three Waters review. It is very significant, and Mr Doherty sits on the reference group with, on behalf of local government. I chair the governance group of the Three Waters Project for Local Government New Zealand. So between us, we've got a pretty good grasp of, as much as we can, of where things might be tracking. But it's fair to say that there is a significant mood for change in terms of both regulation in all areas, regulation, standard, service delivery and asset aggregation and or ownership. So all of those things are on the table and move for change. But if we could just tidy this, I'd be happy.
So are we in agreement that we'll have a recess for just a few minutes, 10 minutes at most, for a tea break, and then we'll reconvene the meeting. we can make a decision on. So that's been amended. Do you wish to speak to that, Madam Mayor?
Just very briefly, look, I'm absolutely respecting what's in the report today and the costs, and I really appreciate that. I just would like one last round really with the technology providers, just to see if we can see a bit of a step change and really get across that. And I just want that opportunity for that engagement with Mr. Cross, who comes from a different sector in terms of the electricity sector, but has a real interest in it, for that conversation to occur. And given it's a recommendation to council, it's possible that those things will get resolved on the way through to council, and then we can, and that'll be ready to go. I think we've got time. But given the volume of money we're talking about here, I think it would be useful just for that one to come up to the committee just to get signed off. It's quite a large tender.
Do you want to speak to that? Yeah. Mr. Lavertus.
Through the chair, can I just looking at the proposed amendment, and I'm just looking from a practical point of view. And the first question I have to ask myself is, if we are going to wait and see what the technology is, I'm just struggling to see how I will put out a tender if I'm going to put out a tender on manual and bring that back to council, when what I'm hearing is you'd like us to explore the other option, and I'm not too sure that gives me ample. I'm just a little bit confused, and I'm just seeking clarification on that, because the way that reads at the moment is that I will now, or after this, get on and tender that work and bring that back to council, but that'll be on a like-for-like basis. So that's a question.
It's a good question. It was a discussion Mr. Ruff and I sort of had in the adjournment as to how we might approach this, just to allow, there's an issue here in terms of what we're talking about in terms of the quantum. This is quite a big contract, this one. It's quite a significant one. So in any event, I think it's probably one that should come back to the committee just to work through that. But I'm quite happy, and Mr. Chair, all I want is just a little bit of time, given, and I'm sorry, I had missed it, that I was anticipating and probably should have had a more direct conversation with you, subject to getting the correspondence from the Residents Association pointing out that the business case hadn't been presented to the committee. I was actually expecting that to come, and so I could have a look at that, and I expect this is a good summary. But the other thing, I just want a bit of time to just check with a couple of technology providers around this to make sure we're not missing a step, and I do want that conversation to have happened with Mr. Cross. So I can probably put a little bit of pressure on myself and Mr. Lavertus, and given this is going up to council, we've got a few weeks to sort that out, and if I've got a concern when it comes to council, I can address it there if you like, and we can get rid of the red bit. But that's what I'll do. So I will just add that to my list, and I'll add that to my list for not next week, but the following week, and do what I can do to satisfy my concerns. Thank you.
So
Mr. Chair, the amendment, are you withdrawing the amendment, Madam?
Yes, I am. I'm going to pursue this myself. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Something of considerable interest to me, and I just want to make sure that we are not respect the business case, but the technology in this space is moving at pace.
Through you, Mr. Chair, I understand that, and I was going to raise my concern that about your amendment needed a bit more wording in there.
Fine. So we're in a position then that the original recommendation stands. Move Councillor Skinner. Do we have a seconder? Second, Councillor Noonan. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Right, now we're straight on to item 9, packs to use on Nelson footpaths, pages 27 to 41.
Margaret.
And I invite Margaret Parfitt to the table. Thank you. Do you have any alterations or amendments to the report?
No, Mr. Chairman, I don't. I'm very conscious of time. In the interest of time saving, I can give a very quick summary of the report.
I think we should have a quick summary, thank you.
So, In August 2017, last year, New Zealand Post came to this committee requesting permission to operate Paxters on our footpaths. And as a result of that, I brought a report to the September meeting on the issue. And in that report, we outlined the request, and it covered some local, some concerns that had been raised by local residents and advocacy groups about the use of Paxters on Nelson footpaths. That report also identified that Hamilton City Council were undertaking a trial because of similar concerns in their area, and the September Works and Infrastructure, or the Infrastructure Committee, recommended to defer any decision until the outcome of the Hamilton City Council trial and bring a report back. So today I can bring you the results of the trial, and I propose that based on those results, the way forward would be that Council approves permission for NZ Post Paxters to be operated on selected routes on our footpaths for a period of 2 years, during which time close monitoring would take place.
Thank you. Questions? Councillor Rutledge.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you. I imagine the key driver for this is economic reasons from the company involved. So if this is proving to be successful, do you anticipate that other courier companies might be keen to get in on this act? And if so, how would we deal with that? And do you foresee any issues if 4 different courier companies want to operate this technology?
Through the Chair, yes, it is economically driven. New Zealand Post business model shows that this is something that needed to happen. They applied to the New Zealand Transport Agency specifically, and the New Zealand Transport Agency have provided them specifically with permission to use these devices. That permission has not been extended to any other businesses, and therefore no other business could approach us and ask that. They would need national approval, and if the NZTA were then to delegate the local decision down to us, that's when we would have to make that decision.
Thank you. Councillor Lloyd.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, are there any costs involved in this trial?
Through the Chair, no, there are no direct costs to Council. The monitoring of the operation, so that we can keep a track of whether there are new concerns or complaints, would require some staff time, but that is within the existing operational budget for staff. We could cover that. Okay, and a quick question through the Chair about the Paxters themselves. In 5.1.3, it talks about there's been some expressions of concern due to the quiet nature of the electric vehicle operation. Electric vehicles like Nissan Leafs, for example, actually produce a sci-fi sound from a speaker in one of the wheel arches so people can hear them coming. Do Paxters have that kind of feature? Through the Chair, I don't know the answer to that question. I know they've been very cognizant of concerns from visually impaired members of the public. They've introduced a reversing audible beep, but I'm not sure about the sound from the wheel. I'm confident that New Zealand Post has done a lot of work to make these more acceptable to particularly the disabled sector. So if they weren't aware of it, then we can certainly work with them locally to make sure they are aware of it and whether they want to adopt it.
Thanks. Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've got 2 questions. One's sort of on the back of Councillor Laurie's. Is there a sounding device on, like a horn? So if they see something, they need to allow somebody some time or let them know they're coming?
Through the Chair, yes, there is a warning device on it, but the etiquette around these is that the Paxters certainly give way to anybody else on the footpaths.
Yes, I was thinking of an emergency situation. The other question through the Chair is, I'm looking at the page 37 where the exclusion zones are, where the Paxters are not allowed on the footpath, and it's a little bit little for me, but how do they get around those areas to get to the areas they can use? So if it looked like the street that actually NZ Post is on is one of the exclusion areas, so are they going to ride on the road?
Through the chair, two parts to the question. Firstly, I'll just point out that what you see as an attachment is a very preliminary desktop exercise, and there is yet to be work done to finalise that for the agreement between Nelson City Council officers and New Zealand Post. So that is desktop, and more work is needed before we sign any agreement. The exclusion zone means they can't ride on the footpath in that area, so they would come off the footpath and ride along the road.
Right, so we can expect Paxters on the road and the footpath, which is good to know. I'd just like to say when I was reading the report, it was really clear, apart from those couple of things, and that perhaps we could thank the Hamilton City Council because they obviously did the trial. We looked at it and said, well, they're doing a trial, let's wait, and they can do the work and we'll use their information, which I think if we could thank them for providing that, that would be great.
Thank you. Councillor Matheson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd like to move the recommendation in its entirety and just briefly speak to it.
Sorry, I missed that.
That's right. No, I'm happy to move the recommendation that we receive the report and also that the council approves the use, etc.
Do we have a seconder for that?
And
Councillor.
And just speak briefly to it. Recently, I'm on the A4A forum, and this was certainly a matter of discussion some time ago, but they were advised that we were looking at a trial, and I didn't get any adverse feedback. And secondly, I actually saw these operating in the hut, in Lower Hutt, when I was staying with my daughter, and I had the opportunity to go and talk to one of the drivers, and I was very, very impressed with the way he handled the traffic, the people, and the vehicle itself. And I think he took away a lot of the negativity that was perceived about these things, and I had some myself, so they're certainly very conscious of what they're doing.
Thank you. So it's been moved and seconded and spoken to. We'll put, we're very short of time. I'll have just a quick question, one question only.
Well, okay. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Marg. Why a 2-year trial? Why not a 12-month trial? Why do you need to trial it for 2 years?
Through the chair, the agreement, the sample agreement we have has a 2-year period in it. There's no reason why we couldn't shorten that or change that.
Do you have any reservations about the speed they travel? I see it's 20k.
Through the chair, the agreement actually makes it lower than that, and I can't quite recall what it is. I think it is lower than that, and again, that's another thing that if we're uncomfortable with when we sign the agreement with New Zealand Post, we can impose our local conditions on that.
Yeah. So we'll put the motion. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you. Now, I haven't an update on where our CEO is relating to. Here we go. I'm just really conscious of time. We've still got one small public excluded item that we have to attend to yet. So we're just waiting now. We give our CEO an opportunity to update us where we are relating to the bond trial cost.
So the answer is proving more complicated to get than I thought, mainly because late in the budgeting process, it was made clear that the trial is not a capital work. It doesn't create an asset that we can depreciate, so it had to be moved into operating funding. And I'm still trying to get to the bottom of where it is sitting in operating funding, because also it's been shifted in as a stormwater responsibility. So I don't have an answer for you today. I will get an answer and I will email it out to you is all I can do at the moment, I'm sorry. But it won't show as a capital item because it's not.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess what I'm looking for is what we actually agreed to budget and what's happened in the meantime.
Yes, and I will get to the bottom of that and I will send it out.
Thank you.
Thank you. Right, well that fixes that part of it then, thank you. So now I'd like to move that we move into public excluded business for the reason stated, item 10. Do we have a seconder? Thank you. Seconded, Councillor Skinner. All those in favour? Aye. Against? Carried. So